Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in today's session. Today's session is around Essential 8 and how we can implement Essential 8 and how you could rate your organization on Essential 8. My name is Roshan. I'll be one of the hosts of today's session. I work as a solution architect with Ingram Micro Australia, based in Melbourne. And if you have any questions on Azure or Microsoft Cloud technology in general, please feel free to drop me an email and I'll be more than happy to get in touch with you and help you with your questions. We also have another presenter today, Elliot from AppPoint, and he'll be covering a couple of things about AppPoint and how it complements the other technologies that we'll be talking about, particularly the Microsoft technologies that we'll be talking about today in the session. And yeah, Elliot will introduce himself as and when he starts presenting. So before I get started with the session, just wanted to quickly run a poll and know if everybody is able to hear me clearly. So I'd appreciate all the attendees to participate in the poll and let me know if you're able to hear the presenter loud and clear. Also, throughout the session, if you do have any questions, please do use the chat and let us know. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout the session and answering them. Also, the session is being recorded, and the recording of the session will be shared with you post the session delivery. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the poll and letting me know. I see everybody is able to hear me loud and clear. Now, before I jump on to the agenda and the other topics, I'm curious to know how many of you currently know about Essential 8 and you have an offering around it for your customers. Wanted to understand your knowledge, your current offering around it. Is it something that you currently have, or this is the first time that you'll be learning around Essential 8? Okay, I'll just wait for a couple more seconds here. Okay, thank you people for participating in the poll. I see about 50% of the people have an offering, 50% of the people do not have an offering. So that's a good mix. So throughout the session, we'll be talking about what is Essential 8, how you can map Essential 8 to certain technologies, and how, and in today's session, we'll be focusing more around Microsoft technology and what within Microsoft technology fits into each of the buckets. That's what is today's session. So let's get started. Let me bring up the next slide. So the agenda, simple, straightforward. We'll look at what is Essential 8, how each of the Essential 8 strategies map to Microsoft technology, and we'll also look at how AppPoint fills in the gap. We'll also look at what are the minimum licenses required in order to, let's say, implement Essential 8. And this is one of the frequently asked questions that I get from partners saying, what licenses should we recommend? What should be the combination of licenses that we need to have in order to implement most or all of the Essential 8 strategies? So we'll be covering about it. We do have a lot of content to cover. So if there is time available towards the end, we'll quickly have a demo around some of the options that we discussed today. And at the end, we'll also have time for the Q&A as well. So to get started, Essential 8. So Essential 8 is 8 cybersecurity strategies that are defined by Australian Cybersecurity Centre. So ACSC is probably the first line of defense against cybersecurity attacks across Australia. Now, the list of strategies that ACSC has built will definitely help you protect against, I would say, most of the cybersecurity attacks. We cannot have just one strategy. It has to be a combination of strategies. Initially, ACSC had about 35 strategies, and then they refined it and brought it down to 8 strategies. And today, what we'll be doing is we have put those 8 strategies into 3 buckets, and we'll be looking into details of how you can use Microsoft technology, specifically Office 365 or Microsoft 365 and Azure, in order to implement these strategies. So like I said earlier, the 8 strategies can be divided into 3 different buckets. The first one we'll be looking at is how you can prevent malware delivery and execution. Right? So what are the ways and options to make sure that you restrict uh, people from accidentally downloading malware or accidentally receiving malware from emails, for example, right? Limiting the extent of cybersecurity incidents. For example, let's say if your systems have been compromised, how can you stop the attacker from lateral movements, moving from one PC to another PC or gaining access to an Active Directory domain account? So how can you stop or limit the extent of the cybersecurity incident within the IT infrastructure? And last but not the least, how can you have strategies around recovering data in case there is a disaster or if there is an accidental deletion of data? So these are 3, I would say, buckets or 3 concepts within which the essential 8 strategies are defined. So looking more into detail, so within the malware delivery and execution, we'll look at application control, patching application, configuring Office macro settings. That's probably one of the most, I would say, used form of attacking infrastructure or attacking users' data, because most of the people use Office, or either it is Excel or Word. We'll also look at a user application hardening. Under cybersecurity incidents, we look at how you can restrict attackers from gaining access to privileged accounts. These accounts are uh, accounts such as domain admin or exchange admin or local administrator. So how can you have additional security around these privileged accounts and make sure you reduce the number of unauthorized access to these accounts? We'll also look at patching operating systems and multi-factor authentication. I'm sure most of you have implemented multi-factor authentication, but we'll definitely go through the concept again. And last but not the least, we'll also look at backups, which are very, very essential, especially when you have loss of data. Again, just want to reiterate, if you do have any questions, please use the chat and let us know, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So mapping the concepts to technology, right? So application control. Application control is nothing but whitelisting of applications. You want only a certain number of application or trusted application to make it easier. You want only trusted applications to run within your infrastructure. Patching application, you want to make sure not just your operating system, but applications which you run. It can be applications such as MyOb or Zero or SAP, Oracle, or even Microsoft Office applications. You want to make sure these applications are patched and up to date. We'll also look at how you can configure macro settings using Office administrative templates and group policies. Uh, Microsoft keeps releasing AMDX files for both for Windows and Office on a regular basis. These are files which help you get more and more group policy objects, which you can further customize and push it across your organization so that you do not have accidental malware or virus downloads happening via the Office applications. And last but not the least, user application hardening. So user application hardening is more centered around the end user himself. What can he download? What can he use? Especially again around browsers. Uh, what browser plugins can he have and things like this. So we'll look at these 4 concepts in greater detail in the upcoming slides. So application control, this is probably the most important control to have within the organization. You do not want users to randomly download any applications that they want to use on their corporate PC and start using it to edit or view corporate documents. Um, Application whitelisting is an approach where you, as a IT admin, or you as an MSP, are able to configure a system in such a way that only trusted applications or trusted scripts can run within that infrastructure. Um, Application whitelisting uses a concept where everything is blocked except the applications which you allow. So by default, all the applications are blocked. No applications can run on the end user machines. And then you start, I would say, configuring the systems in such a way that you're able to allow only trusted applications to run. Now, in today's world where you have remote work, where you have people working from different locations and using different various forms of devices, it becomes very tricky to identify what are the list of applications that an end user or a group of end users would require. And that is where Microsoft has come out with a very interesting concept of going ahead and allowing you to run trusted applications. So the solution, or the tool to use this is part of your Endpoint Manager. It's Microsoft Defender Application Control Management, which is a feature within the Endpoint Manager. And using this particular feature, you can go ahead and with a simple click, or with one click, you can go ahead and have trusted applications run within your infrastructure. Now, what do I mean by trusted? Microsoft has this intelligent graph that collects data from various cloud sources. It collects data from Hotmail, from Live, from Xbox, from Office 365, Microsoft 365. It is also collecting data from Microsoft Defender for endpoints. So using the power of cloud and using the intelligent graph analytics, Microsoft is able to quickly identify which applications are trusted and which applications are not trusted. So by just enabling one feature within Endpoint Manager, you will be able to go ahead and run trusted applications. Now, uh, within Microsoft space, since they are able to collect all this telemetry information, if there is an application that is trying to execute malicious code within the Windows operating system, or is trying to access files which the application shouldn't be accessing, that would be raised, and that feedback, that telemetry feedback, will also be sent across all the tenants which where you have this feature enabled. So for example, if I give you a simple example, there is an application called WinZip, there is an application called 7-Zip. Now, WinZip is a very popular application. There's regular updates and patches that come across WinZip, but 7-Zip is not a very popular application. Now, 7-Zip is one of the applications that is not trusted by Microsoft. So if you enable the service and if any user tries to download and use 7-Zip, it will be blocked for that particular user. Right. So that's a quick example of how you can implement application control using Microsoft technology. The second one is patching. I'm sure everybody within the IT world knows how important is patching. Very recently, even Microsoft Exchange or Microsoft came out with a patch for their on-prem Exchange server, and made constantly made sure that customers using this this on-prem Exchange patch their Exchange on-prem servers as soon as possible. So again, where and how do you get the information about patching? The patching software should be able to scan the applications which you are currently using within your infrastructure, automatically download these softwares from respective application vendors. For example, let's say if your system uses Office apps, Adobe, and let's say AutoCAD, then the patching software should be intelligent enough to identify or scan your system, identify the vendors or solutions which you're using, and have these updates, the latest updates downloaded, and also give you a mechanism to deploy it. Now, it can be a scheduled way of deploying it. It can be a push way of deploying it, where at a certain point of time every day or the application gets updated, and also give you a report on which systems are updated, which systems are not updated. So these are, I'd say, four characteristics that are quite essential for any patch management application. Now, within Microsoft ecosystem, to implement patch management, we again would use Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So Microsoft Endpoint Manager is a suite where you could go ahead and not only patch your Windows devices, but you can also look at managing your Mac and even your mobile devices as well. So it's a cloud native patch management application. And if you are looking for, if your customers use a lot of third-party applications, now applications apart from, let's say, Office and Adobe, for example, if they tend to use a lot of third-party applications, then there is this company called Patch My PC that I've come across, which is used by several of my partners. They do have connectors with, I would say, more than 200 to 300 vendors. And these connectors work very well with both SCCM and with Endpoint Manager. Now, Intune was the old name, so now Intune is renamed to Endpoint Manager. So you can use the connectors from Patch My PC to connect, to download updates from other vendors, have them scheduled and push them to your systems at a scheduled time, or you can do during a restart of the particular PC. So those are two things that we covered. The first one, just to quickly summarize, the first one was application control. The second one was patching. The third one is how can you configure Office macro settings. Now, Office macro settings is very essential because most of the macros are currently written using Visual Basic. And macros in some ways are very essential, especially users who are into accounting team, into financing team. They tend to use macros a lot, which pull and push data from different Excel sheets or different sources as well. There are customers who pull data from SQL database or from an Access database, and are able to compute their, let's say, P&L or even look at other statistics of how the company is performing. But at the same time, these macros can tend to pull data from untrusted locations as well, right? It can pull data from, let's say, a website. It can pull data from a database which contains malicious information. So it's very critical and important that, one, you trust the scripts, the macros that are written, and second, they are accessing data from the right locations. So how do you configure this? This has to be done using the Office admin template and group policies. So this is one of the group policies that most of the customers use and is also highly recommended. Um, so the group policy setting is only macro digitally signed by trusted publishers are enabled. So this is the macro that we configure in most of our security assessments that we do. And it is also the one that we strongly recommend. This is currently the setting for Office 2016, 2019, and the latest one as well. For Office 2013, there's the wording is different, but it is still the same GPO setting. In 2013, you will see digitally signed trusted publishers. Those are the only four words that you would see, and that's the setting that you would need to go ahead and enable. So by enabling this one simple feature, you will be able to stop macros which are downloaded from untrusted locations or from untrusted publishers, and they also make sure they access the right data because these are all digitally signed. Last but not the least is user application hardening. Now, user application hardening is slightly, I would say, diverse. It depends from customer to customer what kind of applications they use and how the users interact with it. In this scenario, we are looking at how you can use user application hardening with respect to browsers. Today, most of the applications are browser enabled. The client server architecture model of application development is reducing, and most applications are now accessible over a browser. Now, when you start accessing applications over a browser, some of these applications require plugins. Some of them require Java. Some of them are public facing, so there might be web advertised content that is being shown when you're trying to access these applications. And older applications, there are several still applications that use Flash. Now, Flash is one of those software that has been discontinued by a lot of companies, but still, we still come across applications that use it. So you do not want your end users to open up a web page and either click on a flash, let's say, advertisement or a web advertisement that without the user's conscious is able to download uh, an application in the background and start running. The same holds true for Java. There are several websites when you log in, they actually ask you to update your Java, and this can be a malicious code that is written on the web page that isn't downloading Java, but probably goes ahead and downloads something else onto your PC. So Essential 8 refers to application hardening with respect to controls over your web browsers. And most of the web browsers today are aware of how you can provide application hardening. And I've put in a quick snapshot of how you can implement essential hardening on some of the popular browsers. So for example, in Chrome, I can go ahead and disable flash settings. So I can go ahead and block all the Flash plugins whenever a user tries to access a particular web page. On Microsoft Edge, again, the same option is available to go ahead and disable Flash and even in Internet Explorer as well. The same option is also available in Safari and Mozilla. So these are, again, via group policy, you can define it and push it across all your organization in order to go ahead and stop people from accessing or downloading things which are not permitted. So moving on to the second bucket, which is limiting the extent of cybersecurity incidents. Now, the first one that we'll be looking at is restricting administrative privileges. So in case your systems are compromised, you want to make sure that the compromised systems are not used in order to access a domain admin account, right? So we'll see what are the options available within the Microsoft technology to do that. Patching operating systems, similar to patching applications, we also have patching operating system, which is again very, very critical and important. I'm sure most of you know that Microsoft 10 or Windows 10 is the last client operating system that would be released from Microsoft, and Microsoft keeps releasing updates and patches for the Windows 10. So it's very, very critical to keep your Windows 10 updated, and not just the client side, but even on the server side as well. Currently, the latest operating system on the server side is Windows Server 2019. But we still do come across customers who are still on Windows 2008 or 2012, which are either end of support or close to end of support. So it's very critical and important that you patch and either upgrade your operating system to hopefully the latest one. And that is what we'll be covering in the second point. The last one is multi-factor authentication. This is today, it's becoming no-brainer. It's very, very critical and important to implement multi-factor authentication. I would say at least 70 to 80% of cybersecurity attacks can be stopped by just implementing multi-factor authentication, right? having another factor apart from your password to identify the user. So we'll look at what options are there within the Microsoft ecosystem to implement these three things. So restricting administrative privileges. Like I said, admin accounts are probably the most important accounts that any hacker would try to get access to, because once an attacker has access to an admin account, he pretty much has control of your organization. He can delete stuff, he can move data from one location to another location. So it's very, very critical and important that you are not only putting security across your infrastructure, across the end users, but you have equally important security functionality across your privileged accounts as well. So how can you implement least administrative privileges? Azure has a feature called Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. So this particular feature lets people gain privileged access only based on approval, only based on, I would say, justification, and only for a certain amount of time. So for example, if I need to make changes to a SQL server and I'm a SQL DBA, and for me to access the SQL server, first of all, I should be promoted to, let's say, a certain account, and then I will be given access to the system for the next 2 days. And after 2 days, automatically my privileges will be demoted. So this is what Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management does. It is able to reduce unneeded, unapproved access to systems and misuse of those privileges. So that is what privileged identity management does, and it is a feature that is available in Azure Active Directory. Also, the what works closely with privileged access management is just-in-time access. Now, the same scenario which I explained, just-in-time access is giving me access to a particular system only for a certain amount of time, again, based on approval and based on justification. If I need access to SQL, or if I need access to a CRM to make some changes, or even to patch the application, I will be able to access the system only for a certain amount of time based on approval, and then I will be able to go ahead and make those changes. After that particular time, let's say after 8 hours, for example, if that is the time slot that I've given, my access would be revoked, which means the ports get closed. If I'm trying to RDP, so the 3389, the default port gets blocked, and I will no longer have access to it. And if I need access, I'll again need to raise a request. So in this way, you're able to control who has access to what, from how long would they require access, and it also has an additional feature called as access review. So for example, let's say today you have given access to 2 to 3 users within your organization as administrators, right? You know, they are part of IT team. They make several changes within within the network, within the Windows systems. So you have given them permanent access or permanent privilege as an administrator. But after 3 months, you want to check whether do they still require this access, right? So that is where access reviews come into play. So access review is again a feature within privileged identity management, which on a regular basis checks if users require the permissions that have been assigned to them. And if they require it, if they still require it for, let's say, another 2 months or 3 months, they have to provide justification. And if they do not require it, and if they do not provide the justification, automatically the privileges will be revoked. So these are very, I would say, important and essential security features around the privileged accounts, that if you implement the extent of access to your privileged account, or extent of unauthorized access to these accounts, can be reduced drastically. We already spoke about patching applications. So quickly talking about patching operating system, it is again a very critical, I would say, component. It is extremely recommended that whenever there is an update or patch released for operating system, or for that matter, application, try and patch it within 48 hours. Now, do remember when organizations or when vendors release patches, they clearly mention what are the loopholes that they're trying to fix within this patch, right? So the information about what, I wouldn't say loopholes, but what are the issues that they're trying to fix within the patch is clearly given in the public forum. So if I'm an intelligent hacker, I can look at what are the issues. I can look at the customers who have not patched and try to either write a script or come out with a Trojan virus or come out with some kind of a exploit mechanism in order to exploit these vulnerabilities within the systems and try to gain access. Hence, it is very critical and important to have this automated system where the application or the patching application is able to look at what are the updates released by those vendors and have them pushed hopefully within the 48 hours of it being released. So again, the application that we'll use is Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Microsoft Endpoint Manager is, I'd say, Microsoft's go-to solution for patch management and configuration management within the Microsoft ecosystem. Now, Microsoft Endpoint Manager is completely cloud-based. It probably has, I would say, more than 90% of all the features that the on-prem SCCM product has. So and it is also part of a lot of Microsoft 365 plans. A lot of your customers would actually be eligible for it because they're already using Office 365. I'm sorry, Microsoft 365. So in the upcoming slides where we'll talk about licenses, we'll look at what are the licenses that include these features or these solutions. And if your customers already have them, then you could potentially go ahead and just enable these simple features and implement one of the strategies of Essential. We spoke about multi-factor authentication. Like I said, in today's world, having password as the only identification factor is not helpful anymore, right? It is very important to have another factor in order to identify the user. We are slowly actually going into the world of passwordless authentication. Very soon, a lot of customers will start implementing passwordless way of accessing applications where the user doesn't even need to enter a password. Just based on his login, it is able to verify his credentials either by using a fingerprint scan or by using retina scan and is able to log in. So he'll not even be prompted for a password to enter. So multi-factor authentication, I would say, stage 1, and stage 2 would probably be passwordless authentication. Now, if you're interested to implement passwordless authentication, do let me know. Microsoft does have solutions around implementing passwordless authentication, and we have customers already using it. So multi-factor authentication is I would say a free feature for anybody who's using Microsoft 365, and I have seen a lot of customers already using it. So that's a good sign. But if you have a new customer onboarded and is currently not using it, I would strongly encourage you to use multi-factor authentication. You could possibly combine multi-factor authentication with another concept called as conditional access. So for example, if I give you an example, you would like to make sure that people accessing from Office are not asked for multi-factor authentication or are only asked for multi-factor authentication once in 14 days if they're accessing from Office and from a corporate device, right? So here you're putting a condition saying if Office or if corporate device, then only ask a multi-factor once in 14 days. You can put another condition saying if they're accessing from outside a trusted IP, it can be your office, branch office, or VPN network, then have multi-factor authentication enabled for them, even though they have logged in from Office. So these are things that you can implement with multi-factor and conditional access. Conditional access is another feature available in Azure AD, which you could potentially use with it and have a much more stronger way of protecting your users. Last but not the least, recovery of data. Now, there are times that data gets deleted accidentally, intentionally. There's always a human error where data can get deleted, or if if you have been attacked, if you have a malware, or if you have a um, attack on your systems where all the data is encrypted, then the only way to recover the data is by restoring data, right? Uh, so it's very, very important and essential to have backup strategy. I would say again, 90% or 95% of all the customers typically have a backup solutions. Either they use Veeam, or they use Store Simple, or they use StorageCraft. Sorry, not Store Simple, StorageCraft, Cloudberry. So there are several solutions available in the market that you could potentially use, but it is very important not to back up just your application data, also that the data that is stored on software as a service, right? So it's not just your server data like your application, like your ERP data or your SQL, even your emails, your Teams data, your Teams conversation, your SharePoint data. These are also very critical to be backed up, because there are times that these data can also be deleted and can become non-recoverable. So in the first section of backup, we'll be looking at Azure Backup Service and Azure Storage. So Azure again has a backup service that can not only back up your on-prem systems, but it can also back up systems that are running in Azure. So you can back up your VM, you can back up SQL database, you can back up Azure files, you can even back up on-premise if you're running on-prem Hyper-V physical servers, VMware servers. You can back up those and store them on Azure Storage. Azure Storage is probably one of the most reliable and secure storage available in the cloud world. It has encryption at rest by default, so all your data which is stored within the Azure Storage is also encrypted by default. So this is one of the methods and mechanisms that you can use in order to back up your on-premise data which is running inside a virtual machine, or you can say if your data is running in an infrastructure as a service model. Next, I'd like to introduce Elliot, who will talk about how you can use Endpoint to fill in the gaps of not only protecting data which is on infrastructure as a service, but also software as a service. Elliot, over to you.
Thanks, Roshan. Appreciate it. That was a really good run through, actually, of what Essential 8 is. I think just to add to what you're talking about there, Essential 8 is basically a great baseline that the government, the CSC, has provided to service providers, such as MSP partners, to assist with that conversation from a sales perspective when you're talking to your clients. It's no longer us as you're trying to be their trusted advisor, trying to talk through what the Essential 8 is, right? Sorry, what security is and what they need. It's now saying, look, the government has given us this baseline that we should be working to, that all businesses should be implementing as a base level security. So definitely taking advantage of what the government has presented to us, leveraging that as part of your sales conversations will allow you to have a smoother process as part of that. So, but that's a great overview of what's available. Appreciate the Ingram Micro team having me on board today to present some of the Endpoint solutions and how we fit in there. Obviously, Endpoint, well, if many of you don't know who we are, we've predominantly been an enterprise type solution. Looking at data management, specifically backup, governance, and things like that. For the last 20 years, we are really focused in the channel, and have put through a lot of investments from this year and moving forward. 5 times Partner of the Year throughout multiple regions around the globe, and we cover a lot of clients directly and through our channel partners today, working with over 50 petabytes of data, which is quite a lot, over 7 million users. So within the channel, we particularly focus on 3 elements. The migration, helping you move from on-prem or cloud to cloud scenarios, or even from other cloud providers such as your Slack to Teams migration, things like that. So obviously one part of the thing is to get you help you get your clients into the cloud, We have a backup solution, which I'll talk to you about today, to really focus on that last point in the essential 8, right? Which is effectively your last line of defense, your security policy against a disaster should something happen, against a ransomware attack, things like that. While there are plenty of solutions out there, I'll show you some of the differences that Endpoint offer that could potentially be leveraged as part of your offerings. Right, and I'll touch on something that sort of goes outside and goes beyond the essential 8, particularly when you're focusing on Microsoft environment, which a lot of businesses do, particularly if they're in the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 space, to focus on how you can sort of enhance or add additional value from a security service using our policies and insights, or PI as we call it. Okay, so when we first focus on the backup, that's really about securing the cloud, right? So you know, a couple of things that come up during conversations I'm sure you have with your clients is, you know, isn't why I went to the cloud service, you know, why do I need backup, right? Doesn't my cloud provider have it covered, right? Many times it could be yes, right? Or it could be a sort of, right? And you need to go through and unpack that and explain that a little bit. Do I really need it? Well, it really comes down to how much risk the company is willing to absorb. And as part of, you know, an MSP, as part of that trusted advisor role, that'll be up to you to sort of determine and identify their level of risk, and then help them understand what options they have as part of that, right? And how would I do it anyway, right? Again, there's a number of options out there. We'll cover off what Endpoint do. So one of the things around backup, and Forrester did a good take of this a few years ago, you know, understanding the sort of demarcation points as part of what Microsoft offers as part of their cloud environments, right? You know, what their SLAs actually do is, if you look in the fine print and read that through, right? So Forrester have gone through and sort of pinpointed those things to understand, all right, these are the things on the left-hand side that Microsoft do. Right? They cover loss of service, right? Anything to do with hardware infrastructure failure on their side, right? Potentially risk against natural disaster or data center outages, right? Or looking at some short-term stuff like anything that will go into a recycling bin or version history of SharePoint, to provide you with, you know, a baseline degree of file restoration capabilities. And then obviously short-term administrative errors as part of that. Again, that might cover a lot of your customers, right? Particularly the smaller ones, right? So that is something that, again, you'll need to determine as part of your risk, right? So then you will need to understand, right, now that you've got the Microsoft perspective of it, what is the customer responsibility, right? That'll be any regulations due to compliance for long-term requirements about data storage and restoration capabilities, whether that is something you need to protect against things like hacktivists and malicious insider threats, or through ransomware attacks, which is very, very common these days, and prolonged outages particularly, right? You need to still have access to your data if you have some sort of outage for whatever reason. Right? So understanding those two buckets, right, and that demarcation between the two will help that conversation in sort of those points we went through on the previous slide about what you need to, what the customer needs to think about when it comes to their data storage, particularly backup and restoration. So when we look at Endpoint's cloud backup, right, there's a number of things that we do, and again, being an enterprise focused organization for the past 20 years, you're getting an enterprise grade tool as part of that channel offering that we're offering to the MSPs. So that's, you know, automatic backups, right? We do up to 4 times retention points per day, which is one of the biggest in the market. We also offer that across multiple Microsoft cloud environments, such as your Dynamics 365, Microsoft and Office 365 environments, including all of Teams, Groups, Exchange, SharePoint, everything that you will get as part of those common licenses. Right, you have a few options there for, you know, unlimited flexibility in terms of where you store your data, including, you know, if you need to store that locally for data compliance, and also the ability to delegate, right, and have the granular restore as part of that, in and out of place, which means you can restore those components directly back into those files back into where they existed prior to being deleted or removed, or you can restore them to another location. So as an example, if you had a user that left the company, right, you need to restore all their email or OneDrive information to another user, you could easily do that as an out-of-place restore. Right, allows you additional visibility and file control, particularly when it relates to things like DSAR and GDPR, right? So that you can get insight as to what the information actually contains, right? So that you could potentially go to look for things that may be protected content as part of a GDPR inquiry, so that you can find particular users' information, and you can delete anything that regarding that user's profile with all their personal identifiable information, or PII. Right. So there's a lot of things that we do there, right? To give you a bit of a snapshot at everything we covered, right? Again, going through Exchange, Microsoft Teams, Groups, SharePoint, OneDrive. We do pretty much everything that's included as part of that. When you focus in on things like Exchange and Microsoft Teams, which is where we potentially differentiate from some of our competitors, we have the ability, particularly with the in-place archive mailboxes on the Exchange side, the ability to easily restore them at that position where they were before, prior to being deleted or archived. We also have the ability to have a more robust Microsoft Teams storage capabilities and restoration points by doing everything, including the private channels, which a lot of our competitors may not do today. At that point down at the bottom, we also have the option to restore the content, or restore the content with all the security permissions that existed prior to, again, being stored away or archived or being removed as well, right? Which is an important note, and allows you a lot of flexibility, particularly when you're dealing with the highly compliant verticals, such as health, legal, maybe education even, to allow you to make sure that you're not restoring something and inappropriately, or exposing that to users that shouldn't have access to it. So while we look at our cloud backup, we also, while we cover off Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, we also do Salesforce, which is a big one. That is particularly important because Salesforce themselves have dropped their offering from a backup solution. That's something that you can leverage as part of that. And we also have Google Workspaces coming very soon as well. So we're covering a lot of the primary cloud solutions that are out there on the market. Our one big differentiator is Ava, right, or Endpoint's virtual assistant. Particularly for the channel, for MSPs looking at reducing the amount of workload they have to do in terms of restoring content. So this is key differentiator. This is basically a bot, if you like, that an application you can deploy across your users' teams. It's basically a Teams channel. Within there, they can go through and self-manage their own restoration, right? So if they've missed an email, deleted an email, they've accidentally deleted a PowerPoint presentation, they can go through and use this to basically find, right, those specific files themselves without having to go to support, to a technician, and potentially utilize their time to go through and do a simple email restore. Right, they can go through, everything will populate within that Teams channel. They can go through, find the file, and simply restore with a click of a button themselves, and that will allow time savings from a technical point of view. So your technicians aren't dealing with those tedious type of restores, and allowing them to focus in on other activities like projects and things that they enjoy doing from a day-to-day basis. So that could have the potential to increase morale, but also save a lot of time and resources as part of providing that sort of offering. We have a lot of GTM resources, that go-to-market resources that really designed to help MSPs as well. We do that along in conjunction with Ingram by working together and providing best case or things to help drive business growth by utilizing best practices and things like that within the Microsoft space. And if you are using our tools, leveraging those tools in the best way possible as well. Right. We do a lot in terms of blogs, webinars. We even have a conference upcoming. If you haven't registered this, I recommend you jumping on. We do have some ANZ focused content in there from people from Deloitte, from councils, things like that to provide a bit of guidance and best practices on how they utilize Microsoft best practices to basically grow their business. One of the biggest X factors is really our support, right? Why we win over a lot of our competitors. We have a 24/7 follow the sun model, live 24/7 support that's available with really, really strict SLAs. A big part there is those 800 dedicated R&D professionals, right? It's the largest within the Microsoft space after Microsoft themselves in terms of R&D potential. Right. So that sort of covers our backup, and I'm happy to answer any questions as part of that. But I wanted to give you a glimpse on potentially what you can do is if you are heavily promoting the Microsoft Cloud, you are looking at additional security components as part of that. Our Policies Insights or PI solution is there to sort of help reduce the amount of workflow they have and make sure that you're providing a level of governance or compliance as part of that offering as well. So today we're leveraging a lot of the native components that Microsoft have, right? So if you have the E3, E5 license, you'll get access to things like the permissions report, which allows you to go through and understand who's got access to certain files. But you know the problem exists. You've got a lot of logs there. How do I prioritize, right? Then you need to go through and understand from an audit capability as who's actually accessed those files, whether they've downloaded it, whether they've accessed it, where they logged in from, right? And then you need to also look at the DLP or data loss prevention report to understand what type of information exists within the documents, whether it's sensitive of nature, such as credit card numbers, bank account details, maybe healthcare numbers and things like that. So when you look at it from a native function, you have the ability to do all this through Microsoft's native functions, say use through typically the E3 and E5 licenses, but you need to do very manually go through that, pull all those different reports, and then aggregate and correlate that information as part of that. Then once you have that information, understand what your users are doing from a collaboration perspective, right? Whether that's through SharePoint, that's through Teams, OneDrive, etc., how they're sharing their documentation. You potentially need to go through and set up your policies by accessing a lot of the checks and balances as part of the Microsoft native functions to go through and limit the exposure by preventing users from sharing externally, as an example, right? So there are a number of places within the administration center, in the compliance center, maybe in the Teams admin that you'll need to go through and set that up to create a policy. And you obviously need to do that for all your clients. Right. So there is now an opportunity for MSPs to obviously add additional security as part of that. So what you're intending to do if you're leveraging all that information is basically helping the client understand the impact that they have today, basically understanding the risks that exist within their organization so that they can then make better data-driven decisions and create better policies as part of that. Obviously, as part of this, you're helping them secure their Microsoft 365 environments, which is basically a core solution of any business these days, but also adding in a potential additional revenue stream as part of your security offering. All right. So when we have a quick look at what that looks like, Policies Insights, this is going to help you understand the risk within that organization. You know, looking at shadow IT, understanding how they're sharing, whether external team members are in a Teams channel, as an example, when potentially they shouldn't be, right? Which potentially gives them access to confidential or sensitive information. So that's going to help you address the context, understand what they're actually doing today. Then with that information, you'll be able to go through and set up rules or your policies, right, to limit that type of behavior that might be considered high risk, such as external sharing. So the example I generally give, if you have a C-level team, an executive leadership team, there's only 10 people within that team, you can go through and restrict the membership to only 10 people. You can also restrict sharing permissions so that they can't share outside the organization within that group. And also limit any external participants from that group as well to make sure that you're keeping in with your certain compliance or regulations, if that might be the case as well. So this is something that, while we're heavily relying on Microsoft for this, we're using their indexing. This is something we're just enhancing on what they already do today. Again, you can do that through the native functions, through that DLP, their retention labels, their sensitivity labels that they have in place today. We're just making it easier for you to go through and correlate and aggregate all that information, right? and the ability to easily create policies in one single pane of glass, as opposed to going through multiple areas of the Microsoft landscape to basically drill down and build out those policies as part of that. So with that, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, happy to answer them during the Q&A session, and I'll hand things back over to Roshan.
Thank you, Elliot. So just to summarize everything that we have covered, as you can see in this slide, we basically map all the essential 8 strategies to the technologies that we spoke about. Like I said, most of them are available out of the box within Azure and Microsoft 365. AppPoint is definitely one of the vendors that has a very good solution, not only with respect to backup, but also overall policy management and security. So I would definitely encourage you to look into the solution and see how you can combine that and offer a security offering to your customer. Quickly talking about the licenses required. So you need to combine a couple of licenses in order to provide the license which is required to implement Essential 8. So Microsoft 365 Business Premium is probably one of the most popular licenses that are used by customers. So that has most of the features except privileged identity management and privileged access management, right? This particular feature and the conditional access, which I spoke about, which you could combine with multi-factor. These 2 features are available in Azure AD Plan 2. So combining Business Premium with Plan 2 should give you, I would say, 95% of all the features and functionality required for Essential 8. And if you add AppPoint, then you are able to provide a 100% solution to your customers. Now, as a next action, what I would recommend is for you to use one of our CSAT tool to go ahead and conduct a cybersecurity assessment, right? You can use this tool. This tool is available in our marketplace. If you need more information around this tool, feel free to get in touch with me. I can definitely provide you more information about what this tool does, what kind of report it gives. But this is probably the starting point for you to assess what infrastructure issues your customers can potentially face when it comes to cybersecurity. So this is a very good and not too expensive cybersecurity tool that we have. Also, what I would recommend for you to do is also look at how you can use Azure Sentinel to identify threats on your Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Sentinel has a functionality called hunting. So think of it as a proactive way of seeing if there can be a potential issue within your M365 subscription. For example, these are the 27, 28 playbooks that Microsoft already has, which you can use. For instance, you could potentially use this first playbook saying multiple password reset done by a user. If you want to know the number of users who have been constantly resetting their password in the last 1 or 2 weeks, then that is something that you would not regularly see, right? Or you want to see rare domains seen in the cloud logins. You are seeing users from different domain names joining into your infrastructure. Or if you'd like to see multiple teams deleted by a single user. Now, this can be because a user might be leaving the organization, or it can be a malicious user, internal user who's trying to delete team sites or teams within the organization. You can look at mail redirection via transport rule. If your administrator has created a transport rule that shouldn't be there, then those are things. So these are 27 to 28 rules which are already there. All you need to do is enable Azure Sentinel, use the Office 365 connector, which is also free, and then you can start creating this report. And this can be part of your managed service offering to your customer, where you can create these reports on a monthly, quarterly, or a weekly basis, and provide a more proactive way of offering security services to your customers. Well, that pretty much brings me to the end of today's session. Hope the session was helpful and informative. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me quickly go through those questions. There's a question from Preetham saying, do we have an override feature for untrusted applications? I'm assuming this is with respect to application control. The answer is no. There is no override feature provided by Azure. Azure provides the application control based on machine learning and intelligent graph, right? So you don't really have that options of saying, even though it is untrusted, I still want it to be trusted. That option is not available, but you could use third-party applications to do that. What of Teams is backed up? Can chat be restored directly to Teams? I think this question is on AppPoint. Elliot, if you can answer this question.
Yeah, thanks, Rashan. I did answer it in the chat, but just to highlight, it's basically the answer is yes, right? There are a couple of dependencies depending on what you're trying to restore. As an example, private channels can be a little bit trickier, and that is more down to restrictions on the Microsoft APIs and anything that basically any backup vendor will have trouble with, right? So, but when you're referring to specific, Teams channels, group chats, things like that, they can then go through. We can then go through and back up basically everything as part of the Teams, including those private channels as well.
Great, wonderful. So those were the questions that I received. Now, before we close today's session, just wanted to run another poll and wanting to know what is that you would like to learn next from our webinar series. There are about 5 topics that I've put up here. So choose the one that most appeals to you and let me know so that we can see if we can develop content around it and have it delivered to you. But apart from that poll, we pretty much come to the close of today's session. Thank you all for participating in the poll, participating in today's session. I hope the session was helpful and informative. Like I said, we have a poll running to identify what is the next session that you would like us to deliver, and based on your feedback, we'll definitely create some content around it. So I'll wait on this particular poll for another 3 to 4 minutes. I'm sorry, 3 to 4 seconds. And we had another question around recording and slides. The recording and slides will be shared with you either by today or by tomorrow. Okay. So I'll go ahead and close this poll. Thank you all for sharing your feedback. I hope the session was again helpful and informative. If you do have any questions around AppPoint or any of the Essential 8 technology that we spoke and how it maps to Microsoft solutions, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. So that's it from us. Thank you very much and have a great day ahead.